Hello everyone, I'm here today to do a video recommending you some historical fictions that I think are really good and maybe you like. There's a little bit of a mix of everything, but you will see as I go through. So the first one is Flight to Canada by Ishmael. This book is, so it was written in the 70s, but it's set in like Civil War America, so like 1800s somewhere. Lincoln is a character in it, and it follows the alternative reality of if slavery was not sort of like not abolished, or more like if the 1800s had the technology and the structures that they had in the 1975, so when this book is written. And so for example, Lincoln is there and slavery is there, but they have healthcare and they have phones and they have flights, and all sorts of things like that, and how ridiculous it will be to have slavery in that situation. So I'm not sure if it counts as historical fiction. It's like historical speculative fiction maybe, but I think it counts. It's very funny, it's very quirky, but it's also very poignant, so I really enjoyed it. The next one I have here is Brotherless Night by W.E.B Ganeshananthan. This was the winner of this year's Women's Prize for Fiction, which I'm very happy about, by the way. And this follows a woman in Sri Lanka during the Sri Lankan Civil War, and she has 4 brothers, and some of them join the militia, some of them don't. She also has a sort of like, not quite a boyfriend, but something similar, that also joins the militia, and she's studying to be a doctor, and she wants to just focus on her studies, but life around her and the people that she cares about doesn't really let her do that, and so she gets involved in politics in ways she doesn't want to, but yeah, we follow her and the Civil War and the things that happen, and some of the people here are real, so like the boyfriend figure, it's based on a real person and things that happened to him. So yeah, it's very powerful. I think it is like she is somewhat detached in the way that it's written, so that might not be for everybody, but I think it is consistent with her character, and I didn't mind it too much. I think that things that happen in this book are really heartbreaking, and yeah, I really enjoyed what it was doing, so I really recommend. The next book that I have here is The Love Songs of W.E.B du Bois by Honore Fannone Jeffers. This is a chunky book. I don't have a copy. A lot of these are chunky books. I think historical fiction thrives on chunky books, but this one is like a generational, multi-generational story about a generation of mostly black people, some of them more educated than others, and it shows a light on how slavery and how that trauma is passed through generations, and how discrimination is also passed through generations, but also like in the part where they go for the early times, there is quite some talk about the interaction between Native Americans and African Americans, which I found very interesting, and I haven't seen too much of. Mostly it's like slavers and their masters, and then Native Americans and the colonizers, but it's not like these things happen at the same time, and it's hardly ever mixed. So I enjoyed that this was mixed in this book, and the characters are very endearing and very easy to get behind. Some of them do very stupid stuff, but you still are rooting for them, and yeah, I found it very engrossing, and I really enjoyed it, so I think you might too. Then the next one in the list is another chunker, and that is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. This one follows several characters around the gold rush in New Zealand, so I think it's 1800s, and it's kind of structured like a mystery, but also it has like it's structured around the phases of the moon, and it's kind of complicated and Victorian structures. It does a lot with literature, but it can also just be read as a normal book if you don't know anything about that. And it is just very engrossing because it's written like a mystery. You really want to know where the story is going and what's going to happen next. It's very good at building that tension. And it's a really big book, but I read it in a week because I was so into it. I really wanted to know what happened. And even like the chapters get shorter and shorter as you go to the end, to the point in which it's like a couple of sentences, which yeah, it's just building that tension even more. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Then the next one is The Colony by Audrey Magee. This one is set around the troubles in Northern Ireland, and it's set in an island quite far from everything in Ireland, and we follow mostly two characters. One of them is French, one of them is English. They both arrive in the island, and they have different ideas of like Irish people and what they are supposed to be like and how they are supposed to interact with them. And the people in this island speak Irish mostly with each other, so both of them feel like very not part of the community at the beginning. And yeah, it's a lot about colonization and how insidious that can be, and how the colonizers sometimes are not even aware. It has a lot of tension around colonization, and also how the colonizers, some of them feel entitled to it, some of them feel like they are sorry for it, but in a way that almost they become the victims of it. And so yeah, it's very interesting dynamics. It's very interesting commentary about what colonization is, and I really loved it. Then if you want to look into something a little bit, I would say, lighter, you can pick up Greenwood by Michel Christie. This is a book based around the harvesting of trees, and it goes like from present day back to the early 1900s and then back up to like the future almost. And it is built in a way in which like it's kind of like a family saga, but it goes backwards instead of forward. There are some things in it, and some ways in which it was marketed which I think are not the sharpest, but overall I think it's a good read. It's very engrossing and you want to know what happens to this family, and yeah, it's just a good read. The next one I want to recommend is The Books of Jacob by Olga Tokarzuk. Again, another chunker. And again, this one is more complicated in terms of like the way the story is told. Is more literary, I would say, but I think it's also partly because it's from a region of the world that we don't know that much about. I mean, I found Wolf Hall really difficult to read, and I think that's because I don't have that much knowledge on English history, whereas many people loved it because they have that background knowledge. Like everyone, when they talk about Wolf Hall, they are like, well, we all know what happens to Anne Boleyn. And I was like, I don't know what happens to Anne Boleyn. What happens to Anne Boleyn? You know, that kind of thing. So I think this book follows these kind of priests in Poland, in like Eastern Europe. It goes from Poland to Turkey. And he goes preaching this different side of religion, like Protestant, but even more like to that side. And it's almost in the cusp of being a cult. And so we follow different characters that are the followers of this man. And to me it felt really funny. Like if you have seen the movie The Life of Brian, that's kind of the vibe that I get from this book. So I found it very funny and very engaging. I have to say I was confused at times, like some of the characters merge into each other and I was not always sure who were we following, so you really have to pay attention to the book to be able to extract the whole story from it. But I think if you get past that barrier, It is super engaging and super funny, and it is a way to learn about a part of the world that I think we are not so familiar with in the Western world. So I would recommend. It might be a bit challenging, but I will still recommend. I really enjoyed it. Continuing with the chunkers, A Suitable Boy by Vikram Seth. This is probably one of the biggest books I've ever read. And it is about these families in India, obviously, in I think around the partition, and mostly it follows this girl that her mom wants to see married, and she has several people that she could marry, and we follow throughout the whole book like what she's gonna decide. And obviously we follow other things as well. There is a lot of turmoil, and there are actual things that happen, like riots and things like that actually happen. And yeah, it's chunky and it's dense, and it took me several months to read it, but I think the story is quite, except from a few parts in which we go deep into the politics of the time, I think mostly it reads like a soap opera in a lot of it, and so I think it is easy to read in a way. The language is not something that stops you from keeping reading and enjoying the book, and it's kind of addictive at some point. So I enjoyed it. I think it is a challenge, and you have to take it with a little bit of patience. My copy is 1474 pages. So yeah, probably the longest book I've ever read, and the font is quite small as well. So it is a chunker, and it's probably going to take several months, but still I think it's worth the read. And then another chunker, The Eighth Light by Nino Haratischvili. So this one is a family saga set in Georgia around early 1900s up to almost present day. I think the last part is like 2006 or something. And this follows, as I said, a family. It focuses a lot on the time of like Stalin, because Stalin was Georgian, and like the terror and the lack of self-governance that Georgia had at that moment. It also covers the fall of the Russian Empire, and it covers like the fall of the USSR and a lot of things like that. It also follows like some of the characters are part of the LGBTQ community, and so that even complicates things further, and it's just very endearing and very, very good, and again very immersive. I read this fairly quickly as well, like maybe 10 days or something, and it's like 1,000 pages. So yeah, it was a good book, and I would recommend. And then the last one in this list is not as chunky, is The Pool of the Stars by Emma Donohue. This one is set in a hospital, I think early 1900s as well, in Ireland, and we kind of follow the maternity ward there, and kind of like the different types of women that come there. So some of them come with their husbands, and some of them look forced to have this baby. Some of them are like abandoned by their husbands. Some of them are single women, and they are all treated very differently by society, because it's a very religious and Catholic behavior, like very religious and Catholic environment. And so we follow all those politics and how the people in charge of this maternity hospital want to protect the woman and the baby, but some upper management are not so keen, and they are trying to follow like government orders about what they are supposed to do with certain babies. It's also set on a plague, so this ward is maternity for people that have that plague, so a lot of them don't make it. Yeah, very interesting, very engrossing. I was there the whole time. The characters are very endearing as well, and I really enjoyed it, and I think more people should read it. So that's why it's in my list. I hope you enjoyed these books. Let me know if you have read any of them, what you thought of them. Let me know if you have any more recommendations of historical fiction that you think I might like based on these recommendations. And until next video, bye!